I've certainly been on natural history shoots where you might go a whole week without even pushing record.
Really?
Because the light's bad.
The data wrangler on your shoots must be pulling their hair out.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. I actually got nicknamed Terry Terabyte on one of those shoots. It took me the longest time out of anything that I've learned was that story's number one.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Full Frame Podcast presented by Sony. Today we're in the studio with Ben Cunningham. How are you?
Good, Clyde. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming all the way up from Melbourne. We've had a lot of Melbourne guests on recently. Maybe that's a good indication of where the industry is at the moment.
Melbourne's always, I guess it's always been a pretty creative city, so it doesn't surprise me,
Yeah. So thanks for coming in, and we'd really love to hear about kind of your story about, what it's like working as someone who, is producing things for large streaming services. Like, I think we've had a lot of stills photographers on. We've had some kind of some people maybe working in maybe production agency level, but today we're really going to dig into some exciting stuff at that kind of real production tier. So do you want to just talk a little bit about who you are and what you've done?
Yeah, I guess I'm predominantly a documentary cinematographer, working mostly in the natural history kind of genre. That's my preferred place of work if possible, but it's currently in a bit of a downturn. Like the whole industry's taken a little bit of a dip, and natural history is certainly quiet at the moment. So I've been shooting some other types of projects also.
Yeah. Why is that? I'd love to know why you think there's a little bit of a dip, especially in natural history.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's talked about frequently at the moment. But I think during COVID there was a production boom across again all genres. I think everybody I knew in the industry was very busy, including wildlife.
Is that because of that increased demand?
I think so. I think the streamers, which that was kind of mid streamer wars, I guess, when there was suddenly many players on the market all trying to outdo each other and win audiences and win subscriptions, basically. So they were keen to produce a lot of content, and I guess COVID as well. I think they knew everyone was at home watching television, so there would be this never-ending appetite for content. So natural history got very busy, and I think a third kind of aspect to that related to COVID was that natural history, is produced or shot in remote wild places usually, or most of it. So we were nowhere near lockdown basically, and
so it was still possible.
It was possible, and Australia, COVID was largely confined to the cities here, mostly Melbourne, really. So it was, we got this huge country with a lot of wild places, so it was a good place to work in natural history.
Yeah. I wonder if the demand for natural history as well is also maybe diminishing because of how easily it is to produce a lot of other content now. Yeah, I'm thinking about, reality TV and the shift towards streaming services as opposed to network TV. I wonder if that had an impact as well.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. Natural history is very expensive to make because while we have fairly small crews, they use a lot of fairly high-end equipment, and the shoots are very long.
Yeah.
Without any guarantee that you're going to get the money shot or the behavior that you're after to make good quality natural history, you really need the money shots, and there's a lot of inherent risk in that. Also, I think a lot of natural history has been made, and I'm certainly somebody that's concerned about the conservation of our planet, and it's disappearing. Wild places are disappearing fast.
Yeah.
So that's probably another factor, is that there are, it's harder to make because there are so many people and so few animals.
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about conservation as well. And I would hope that, as like you said, as wild places disappear, there should be an incentive, or at least there should be a acknowledgement that, shows like that or content specifically kind of promoting that conservation aspect should be promoted.
Yeah, I agree. I've battled in my head for the last few years about the responsibility of the natural history industry to have maybe been more explicit in showing audiences around the world just how far we'd gone in terms of the destruction of the natural world, and maybe showing these fairy tale kind of beautiful wild images. Maybe they were complicit in hiding it a little bit, but certainly recently they've been far more upfront about the loss that the planet's faced, and trying to push a more conservation message.
How do you find that balance as a like a documentarian, where you want to create things that are visually appealing or visually stunning, but you also have to kind of let things unfold as naturally as possible, with like not necessarily an obligation to do that, but that's kind of the way things have always been and should be.
Yeah, it's an interesting question actually. That's part of the reason the shoots are very long and they have good budgets, because you need to wait for good light and the right conditions and the animals to behave.
Yeah.
I've certainly been on natural history shoots where you might go a whole week without even pushing record.
Really?
Because the light's bad. And clearly that would never happen on any other kind of shoot.
Yeah.
You just got to shoot the call sheet, you know what I mean? So there are allowances afforded for that.
What's a typical length of a shoot? Yeah. So say one of the projects you've done for BBC, Netflix, Apple.
Yeah, good question. So often on the big series, you're hired for a sequence. So it might be 5 to 7 minute sequence.
Yeah.
And typically you get maybe 4 to 6 weeks to shoot 5 minutes.
Are you managing those projects individually? Like, as in the production company that's running XYZ show approaches you and says, "Hey, we need this sequence or this part of this selection of shots," and then you're managing that project?
Not as much as you would think.
Okay.
Increasingly, that's happening. I think as a result of COVID, where we had to work what they called remotely, where we did take on a lot more of the the production role. But typically, 80% of the production companies producing high-end natural history are based in Bristol in the UK, which is where the BBC Natural History Unit is. So many independent production companies have popped up around the BBC. And some of the BBC content you see is actually produced by other companies like Silverback or Plimsoll or Wildstar. And they're quite big companies.
I've seen quite a bit of the Wildstar work.
Yeah. Typically, though, they will, they'll have a series commissioned and they'll pitch sequences to the commissioner, which are then approved. And they'll have a team of researchers who will do all of the research into the behaviour. They'll write a script, do a shot list, pitch, revisit that with the commissioner, who will then approve it. We're very much the end of the chain as a
DP. So it
DP.
trickles all the way down.
All the way down, yeah. And quite often, they'll send a producer and a researcher from Bristol.
Yeah.
So you might be in a team of 3 or 4 and maybe some other help if you've got.
And that obviously drives the cost up as well.
Exactly, yeah. So there has been a push. I think in COVID they realised, hey, hang on a second, we don't have to fly all these people all around the world for every shoot. There are skilled, talented people in other parts of the world that can handle some of it themselves. So some more of my shoots now have been handled by me. You're still given a script and a shot list and some of the research, but largely I'll do the rest myself.
Yeah. With those kind of projects, like what's the kind of turnaround time? You said maybe, if it's a 7-minute sequence and you've got 6 weeks to do it, that means they're planning these shows so far in advance.
Yeah, it's extraordinary actually, and quite difficult from a showreel and marketing oneself perspective, because if you're some of the series like Planet Earth, for example, which I haven't worked on, but that's a good example because everyone's heard of it. A big series for Planet Earth 2, for example, might be a 6 or 7 year project from commissioning to delivery. So if you're somebody that shoots a sequence near, in the second year of that, you won't see the product until maybe 6 years later.
Yeah.
Some of the projects I've worked on, it's been more like, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. So how do you market yourself as a production company, Nice Tree?
Yeah.
But how do you secure clients, and is it just word of mouth? Is it industry leads? Obviously, you have ACS accreditation.
Yeah.
How does that kind of work with your role as being able to contract out like that?
Yeah, for most of my career, it was very much word of mouth. I started as a camera assistant working for established DPs that were shooting natural history. I was kind of drawn to that as a subject. So I sought them out. I was lucky to work with, some really world-class DPs in Australia like Rory McGuinness and David Parra, Peter Neros and a few others that kind of taught me the ropes and allowed my name, you get credits basically, and you meet producers who come from the UK or whoever you're working for, and one thing leads to the next, and like any career, I guess. So that was very much the case for the first probably 10 years. But then once I had some credible work that that I was proud of and that was stood up on a world stage, then I started to field calls from people that had seen my work, and knew where I was based, and it made sense to at least have a conversation. Some led to work, and sometimes it didn't. But yeah.
So you are also part of ACS as well. What does that kind of look like? What for people that don't know, that's the Australian Cinematographers Society. They offer things like, obviously it's a networking and industry group, but there's also accreditations and things like that. Like, how important is that?
Yeah, I think it's important from a few aspects. Early in my career, I worked for a rental house called Lemac, and we rented gear to commercials and drama productions and all kinds of things. So I was more kind of connected and involved with the industry proper, I guess. The non-natural history, the non-documentary part of the industry, and as a result was involved with the ACS. We would sponsor events and et cetera, et cetera. So I'd go to all of the evenings, and I kind of really enjoyed them from a networking perspective, but also a personal networking perspective, to feel part of a community.
Yeah.
And then I started shooting, and I like most of us, I suffered from imposter syndrome, particularly early on, and I never felt that any of my work was good enough to, I'd be embarrassed to enter it, for example. But I was kind of encouraged by particularly Peter Neros, one of those mentors that I mentioned earlier, to go down that path, mostly to stay connected with that community. And I have to say he was right. I started entering things, and I was lucky to get a few awards, and then that led, my work got better as time went on, and eventually I'd had enough awards that the ACS themselves encouraged me to apply for accreditation because they felt my work was good enough, which was really nice, and it helped me dispel in my own mind the imposter syndrome. So I did, and going to the awards now, particularly when you work in natural history, I don't see any of those people anymore that I guess I'd call my peers in the industry from when I started out, who are now shooting dramas and features all around the world, some of them. But now I'm connected. It's been really, really lovely.
What drew you into natural history specifically?
Yeah, good question. I'd always enjoyed the outdoors, but I know I'm not alone in that respect. But certainly nearly, all of my recreation was spent in fairly wild places. And actually my dad worked he was a statistician at ANU, a professor there, but he worked with a lot of ecologists. Yeah. It was kind of applied stats, and he was often out in the field, designing data kind of experiments around lions or possums or all kinds of different animals.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a cool job actually. Like you always think of statistics as being really
pretty
dry,
boring.
exactly. But he found a way to make it, it good for him.
Yeah.
And I think that probably rubbed off on me a bit. I met, some of the scientists he was working with, and kind of enjoyed watching animals. And you know what? I like the adventure of it. Like, it's pretty exciting working, on a really, I worked on a killer whale documentary. We got to dive with killer whales. I've done work on dolphins, gorillas, all kinds of amazing places. And as much as the work itself, the life experience, very rewarding, and it's an adventure. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand how that would be really rewarding, but also kind of keeps you present as well, as opposed to, you're always thinking about the next project or always thinking about the shot list, whereas if you're like kind of just there in the moment shooting it, you can just kind of really immerse yourself in that lifestyle.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's actually one of my weaknesses, I would say, if I'm on a long shoot. Like, sometimes you work, I did a project a few years ago for Netflix through actually an American production company called Ample Entertainment, but it was 18 weeks over the course of a year.
Wow.
So in my mind, I didn't really have to worry about work for a little while, but as a result, I kind of didn't think about it. And you're very much in the moment, in the wild kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when I got to the end of that project, I had nothing lined up. Anyway.
I mean, 18 weeks is still pretty good.
It was good, yeah. It wasn't straight. It was, 3 or 4 6-week blocks.
Yeah. What kind of projects have really inspired you, or what kind of projects are on the radar for you?
Yeah, more recently, when natural history it wasn't really in the doldrums yet, but it was starting to decline, and I was asked by a Sydney director by the name of Ian Darling to shoot a feature doc on the pool in Bondi called the Icebergs.
Yeah.
He's someone I'd worked for a few times over the years previously, and he asked me to be involved actually because of my wildlife natural history experience, because he felt that he wanted to make the pool the main character. It was all about the pool, and everybody who's ever been to that pool has a story about how stunning it is
Yeah.
and that's true. It's an incredible place that gets, all kinds of different colors and light and sea behavior and people and all that kind of thing. But if you go and spend a day there, there'll be maybe 4 or 5 little 5-minute windows through the day where everything's just perfect. So
Yeah.
he wanted to treat that or the shooting of that much like a natural history project.
That's so interesting.
Where he was willing to give it a lot of time, knowing that we might be there and not hit record if it didn't look good.
Yeah.
So so I jumped at the opportunity, to work, to have a long-running project. It was predictable. I've got kids now, so he was able to schedule around school holidays.
Oh, perfect.
Et cetera, et cetera. So it was a perfect job for me, and I really enjoyed working with people as opposed to animals.
Yeah. That wasn't a first, obviously, but
Wasn't a first. I do I
Yeah.
shoot ABC Backroads, which is a TV travel show. I've done lots of work with people, but not in a feature doc sense. And it actually satisfied me, more than I expected. And I've since filmed another project with Ian called The Valley, which is yet to be released. They just hit picture lock last week, and it's being graded at the moment. And it's a similar kind of, I'd call it like a Wiseman-esque. Fred Wiseman makes these long observational documentaries, and Ian's kind of been fascinated by him for a few years. So I think it was his opportunity to make his Wiseman film, and basically a portrait of a rural town.
Yeah. What kind of crew are you working with at the moment, like in terms of size for these kind of projects?
Yeah, it varies. The natural history project I mentioned before it was called Kangaroo Valley. It was shot in Canberra. There were 8 of us there because for the 18 weeks, because we had a like a shot over specialist came from the UK, and we had a shot over mounted on an electric ATV to get all the tracking shots.
That's pretty cool.
Of the dingoes and kangaroos.
Yeah.
And we had another unit that were focusing purely on the dingoes hunting, and I was doing the kangaroo behaviour. So we were all there together. So, but there were four DOPs there.
Yeah, wow.
And the support around that, someone to drive the ATV, a production assistant, a director.
Yeah.
But the pool documentary, there were 3 of us, Ian, sound recordist, and myself.
Yeah. What kind of camera package are you working on for these projects?
Yeah, it varies a bit. The pool's probably the best example. I shot on the Sony. I've got a Sony Venice 1.
Venice 1, yeah.
Venice 1, yeah. I haven't been able to afford a 2 just yet. And
not many people can say they own a Venice.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice camera. And initially when the 2 came out, I actually chose to stay with the 1 because when the 2 first came out, it wasn't capable of high enough frame rates for wildlife work. Anyway, I'm happy with the 1. And it wasn't straightforward convincing Ian. It costs more than than another camera.
Yeah.
So it costs more when I use it. I have to charge more. Convincing Ian that it was worthwhile wasn't straightforward. But the reason I really wanted to shoot the pool on that was because the light there's crazy.
It's also a very high dynamic range scene.
High dynamic range.
Yeah.
There's water splashing everywhere, so you got all these spectral highlights. There's movement. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And I really felt that the XOCN codec, 16-bit, was going to be really crucial to kind of holding all of that.
Yeah.
In an environment where we couldn't really pre-plan what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased that we did, because it looks. I'm really happy with the way it looks. Yeah.
For those natural history shoots that you're doing where it is focused on animal behavior, and you said, sometimes you're not even pressing record. If you're shooting all of those in 16-bit XOCN, those the data wrangler on your shoots must be pulling their hair out.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Exactly. Which is why you have to be careful.
Yeah.
And not button on,
Especially like when you said you're shooting at high frame rates as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Like shooting. Yeah, exactly. XOCN ST at, 100 frames per second. Yeah. That's a lot of data.
That's a lot of data.
A lot of data.
At least you don't have to worry about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually got nicknamed Terry Terabyte on one of those shoots I did.
Terry Terabyte.
Yeah, I was shooting the kangaroo behavior, and it was like the story of a joey growing up, and there was a lot going on every day. I rolled a lot.
Yeah. That's funny.
Maybe too much.
Maybe too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were happy with the results. And then back to the pool, we also used a FX6 on a gimbal.
Yeah.
For some of this, the more some of the people on race day, it was just too hard to wrangle the Venice and a bit scary because people are jumping. There's water going everywhere, salt water.
Yeah.
But I think in the final film there were maybe like 5 shots from the FX6. Plenty from we had an FX3 in a housing.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, especially now that the cinema line's really becoming a bit more fleshed out, a lot of people, it isn't just the image that improves as you move up the chain. It's, it's the actual support crew as well that you need to, if you're using a Venice as a solo operator, that's a bit of a job.
It's hard.
Whereas, running an FX3, like you said, in a housing, it's just easier. It's more flexible. You can mount it places that you can't put a Venice.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we did consider using the Venice underwater.
Oh, really?
But, just that, we really wanted to have the underwater camera ready to pick up and go.
Yeah.
So we needed 2 setups, obviously, and also the house. Yeah. The Venice in a housing would be very heavy.
Yeah. I remember when I helped a gentleman for the Olympics. I think it was Paris. Was it Paris 2020? No.
Maybe
Paris 2020 or was it 2024? Anyway, it was whatever the 2020 Olympics was.
Yeah.
And we were working on this project to try and get an FX6 in a housing.
Mm-hmm.
But the trick was he also wanted to record audio underwater.
Oh, wow.
Because it was going to be mounted on a rail system with a tracking.
Yeah.
So basically, as the swimmers dive in, the camera would move underwater to follow them the length of the pool.
Cool.
And trying to get an FX6 underwater and running audio in, we had to completely, discuss about how you can remove the handle and still run audio in, and you had to get the CAD files and all this kind of stuff
to use those connectors on the top. Yeah. That's actually the only thing wrong with that camera.
No, don't cut that. That's right. But yeah, it is interesting, and hopefully, as things progress, they can.
Yeah. Well, they have only one thing that people gripe about. It's a pretty good.
That is a pretty good
result.
Yeah,
really.
I agree.
Anyway,
I agree. No, you're fine.
I couldn't find a good underwater housing for the FX6 when I was shooting the. We were going to have to get one made,
and that's why you went for the
FX3 exactly.
Yep.
But since then, I think Salty and Nauticam and Gates have all released really great housings for the FX6. It's a perfect camera for underwater.
Yeah, I know a lot of documentary shooters that are using FX6.
Yeah.
Just because, you've got run and gun internal ND, which makes life much easier than an FX3.
Mm-hmm.
And just the weight and size of package to the actual image output.
Yeah.
It's a good camera package for that. I think NRL just switched to using FX6s. I've got a few friends at the ABC that just swapped all to FX6.
Really?
Yeah.
NRL. Wow.
Yeah, I think not for the full game coverage, but after there's a try and it cuts to you can see it when you're watching it. It'll be it'd be your normal broadcast camera, and then the moment there's a try and they do the player close up as they're celebrating, and the quality gets better, and you're like, oh, that's the FX6
full frame.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, a lot of people switching to that system.
Thing.
Yeah.
I've considered, I've been close a couple of times to jumping on board the Burano because I think, particularly for the ABC Backroads show that I shoot, I need to have a camera set up on a gimbal and an A camera.
Oh, and using the same camera package for both?
Yeah, well, potentially. So currently I use the FX6 on the gimbal because it's perfect for that. And then I'm still using the Venice, believe it or not, which is very difficult. It's heavy. to have on your shoulder 10 hours a day.
Yeah, that would be.
Verano would be fabulous because the autofocus.
Yeah, and internal stabilization as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll wait and see.
That the next big purchase, is it?
Yeah, maybe with the new firmware, it's actually
they've added a few more
really great
frame rate options.
Yeah. Really completed it, I think.
Yeah, I've got my eye on a Burano as well.
Yeah. I won't. I was going to say, I really wish they'd put a viewfinder connector on it, so you could, if you wanted to, use the
Venice viewfinder,
DVF 200.
Yeah,
like a proper eyepiece viewfinder
instead of just a loop that's over the existing panel.
Yeah, I get why you need the panel and touchscreen and all that kind of thing, but the option would be fabulous.
Yeah.
What
are your thoughts on using the FX6 versus the Venice? Because obviously when you're using the FX6, you can just do touch autofocus. Did you, obviously as someone who is a cinematographer, the industry has been manual focus for forever. And now there's this slow growing shift where, autofocus algorithms and then the ability to touch to track, eye tracking, things like that are, especially maybe on like the mirrorless stuff, awesome. But in terms of the bigger camera packages, they're getting to a point where they are really usable. What are your thoughts on that? Do you pick up the FX6 sometimes and you're just like, oh, I wish?
Yeah, it's a good question. I really like the autofocus and use it a lot. But I have to admit that early on when I started using it, I think I overused it, and got caught out a couple of times, wishing that I think it probably made me a little bit lazy from a creative perspective on when you choose to focus on what.
Yeah. Okay.
Just leave it on eye tracking, and dude's eyes are always sharp.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
Yeah. Awesome.
But sometimes, on the fly, when you're really kind of in the zone, for want of a better word, you make choices that are other than that, and and they look fabulous. And I think early on, I probably locked myself out of thinking about focus as a creative tool.
Yeah.
But looked at it more from a technical perspective. And then I noticed whenever I'd watch episodes back, I'd be like, what's missing here? And,
Okay.
So now I use it less.
Do you do a lot of those kind of where you rewatch stuff, like rewatch your work?
I'll always watch, I'll always try to watch it once.
Yeah.
Just to see
what made the cut.
What made the cut, yeah. What choices has the editor made based on what I gave them? Yeah. And have they, what missed and what didn't,
And collecting that information obviously informs you as a shooter about like what you actually need versus what you don't.
I also try to have a conversation with, the editor afterwards, just to find out, particularly if there's a choice that they've made that I'm, like if
disagree with.
Exactly. If I feel like I shot a really fabulous sequence or a couple of shots that they didn't use, kind of sometimes question why. And conversely, if there's some really shots that I'm not happy with, clearly it's about serving the story, and usually that's the reason. But sometimes I question whether there was a way to cut around a poor shot, or you know what I mean, or if they've used a shot during a part of it that clearly wasn't meant to be on air. A reframe, whatever. It makes you wince often.
Yeah,
I'm sure you have the same experience. I don't think you're ever truly happy with all of your work.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. When you're shooting, is it kind of like, are you making kind of mental notes or like dropping shot marks or anything where you think, this is the key moment, or like writing notes alongside? Because like if you're going through terabytes of footage, are you providing your editor with any additional notes? Yeah,
with natural history, for sure. Every night I watch all the rushes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and make notes. And it clarifies in my mind whether a shot that I remember getting was as good as I thought, or whether I needed to, put it back on the shot list to reshoot another time, because you're always obviously, locking away the sequence as you go. I've got the wide shot, I've got this bit of behavior, I've got that bit of behavior. So you need to be sure that you have it. Whereas Backroads, the travel show, there's a producer there.
They're keeping track of all of that for you.
Yeah, and we're shooting a lot of stuff, so there's not really time for doing that.
Yeah. I think when I've shot maybe 2 docos before, but the thing for me was always I was trying to be too much of a perfectionist, trying to make sure that every shot was just incredible. And I think because I was so focused on that, I wasn't serving the story as best I could have.
Yeah, I reckon I was the same early on, to be honest. Totally, I was more obsessed by the technical perfection.
Oh, that's me.
even before I got to the point of aesthetic perfection.
Yeah.
And then as I've gone on, you're totally right. It took me the longest time out of anything that I've learned was that story's number one, and that's an easy trap to fall into when you've come from a technical background, which, it's...
If you worked at Mac and you're prepping all of the gear for, a production company or
exactly.
a DOP.
Yeah. It's still important, obviously.
Yeah.
Finding the balance. Yeah. And it's different. It's different on the basis of the director you're working with too. Like, always difficult. I find the first day of a shooting with a new director, trying to work out what's most important to them, or where their cutoff points are for imperfections of any kind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, okay, that was a beautiful moment. It wasn't perfectly sharp for the whole shot. Doesn't matter, whereas others might be more important,
Yeah. And I guess that would also be reflective of your background because like I'm imagining watching, say, like The Pool or any of the work, like you mentioned Big Planet earlier, but like when you're watching something like that, it's the animal behavior that's most important to the story. So like if 1 or 2 frames are out of focus, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly.
But say if it was drama, or like a like talking to camera piece, then if it's dropping in and out, then it becomes very distracting.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, you definitely get away with more in documentary, and particularly if it's kind of more observational doc, because I think the audience expects that it's real.
Yeah.
Whereas, The Pool was observational, but it was definitely designed.
It was sculpted in a way
to be viewed on a big screen as well.
Yeah.
So we were very careful on that shoot to make sure everything was technically fabulous as well.
Yeah.
When we could.
Yeah. Circling back to conservation, so that's obviously a really big, important thing to you. Are there any personal projects you've been working on or projects that are coming up where, that's a big focus for you?
Yeah.
As you said, you wanted to kind of combat the lull, as you said.
Yeah, good question. I'm trying to develop a project at the moment, which loosely, I can't talk too much about it, but loosely around dingo conservation in the high country.
That'll be really exciting. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what else am I doing? Hoping for more natural history work to.
Yeah.
There's still work, but there's nothing significant at the moment. Hopefully, that industry picks up again soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one thing I really appreciated. So just before I started really running my own business, we did some work for Sony around the road to zero. So, getting to net zero. I mean, as a brand that supports so many wildlife photographers and filmmakers, it is nice to know that they're actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
And then again, this is going to sound like a sales pitch, but a lot of the camera bodies are actually made out of recycled plastic now called Sawplas. Huh. And the move is to get all production powered by solar as well.
I learned something today. That's really
it's
good.
It's really good.
Totally good, yeah.
I mean, I've got an Alpha 1 and an Alpha 9 Mark III on the cabinet over there. And the Alpha 9 is basically the whole outside of the chassis. It's all recycled plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome because, the images that the gear makes is the stuff that, changes things. Like you were not me talking to, but hearing stuff from, other wildlife filmmakers like Paul Nicklin and Midi and seeing documentaries from them. And it's, people don't donate or they don't change their lifestyle based on text that they read. They base it off visuals that they see.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to know that the stuff that's creating those visuals as well is also on the right path.
Yeah, and considering their footprint, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I didn't know. Yeah, that's fabulous.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. I think too, as the population of the world grow older, I think younger people care a lot more about that than some of the older generations. So, even from a business perspective, it's probably a really, important aspect to any business now is to actually, care what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we all want the best for the next generation. So it as long as everyone does their little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What's your dream project? Something that, really, if you could build your dream project to work on, what would it be? It's a tough one.
That's a really tough one. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, are there any species that you have yet to film or a location you're kind of dying to go and work at?
It would be a wildlife thing, and it would be in mountains somewhere. I've always loved mountains my whole life and spent as much time as I can in them. So, yeah, it would probably be working on something in the Himalaya or any big mountains around the world, I think.
That would be pretty exciting.
Yeah, that would suit me down to the ground for sure.
So you talked a little bit about COVID and how that kind of changed the industry as a whole, but how did streaming change productions? Because, I'm imagining there'd be a change of expectation, timelines, budgets, things like that. How did streaming really change the work that you do?
Yeah, I think streaming's obviously had a really big impact on the whole industry. And initially, I think it had a very positive impact. There was more production for sure. As I spoke about earlier, there were other factors involved probably, but there was definitely an increase in production, and I think that the production values went up. I think the budgets went up. Particularly things commissioned by Netflix, had very healthy budgets, which allowed, natural history productions to have lots of toys and all of the things that you don't always get on every shoot were kind of readily available. I did another series actually for Apple TV called Tiny World, which had a very healthy budget, and it was a fabulous show to work on. But I wonder whether in the long term, the biggest shift is that they've shifted to a subscription-based thing, and I'm not sure audiences fully grasp the kind of impact that would have long term. We were all used to watching commercial television where advertising just happily paid for everything, really. And now it's purely or almost purely subscription at a time when, economics is, it's proving hard for people to make a good living. It's a good question. It feels to me that the streamers were happy to battle out for supremacy and make all this amazing, the golden age of television, but perhaps there hasn't been the return to the investors into the streamers that they expected, which I think has contributed largely to the quiet period we're in. So I think long term, it'll be really great. Yeah. Obviously, it's great for audiences. Everything's on demand, et cetera, but until they work out their economic model well enough that it's sustainable, I think we're currently kind of paying as a production crew where the turbulence of finding that balance is tricky. Yeah.
From a consumer standpoint, though, it is interesting because now when someone engages with natural history documentary, they're doing it because they're interested and they're doing it because they have a passion, or they're probably going to be more highly engaged than someone just clicking through clicking through the channels and deciding, oh, well, nothing else is on, I'll watch this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, the data and the metrics and all the analytics that you can gain from, streaming platforms, all the data analytics that you can gain from streaming platforms is really valuable as a creator. Whether I'm crew working for a production or whether you're creating it yourself, all of that information of what audiences are looking for, I think is, it's extremely valuable. And, you can tailor your productions to suit the needs of the audiences or the, whatever people are watching at the time. Absolutely.
I found it to be a lot more accessible as well because around the time that kind of those streaming services really took off, I became more interested in, outdoor activities. I started being more interested in climbing. I now mountain bike. I'm a pretty outdoorsy person as well. But as this became available, Nat Geo signed with Disney, and now all the Nat Geo content was available. And so I saw this kind of massive uptick in outdoor, not necessarily always natural history, but
Outdoor.
adventure sport, outdoor.
Yeah.
Because there's a very healthy overlap between, people that enjoy activity in the outdoors and people that care about the outdoors. There's a very strong, healthy overlap.
Totally. Yeah, I have to agree. I've got my kids are 9 and 11, and I've been really stoked watching them make choices about what they want to watch, because
that's exciting.
They've definitely gravitated towards that similar content that you're talking about, the adventure. Not always pure natural history, but certainly that outdoor kind of adventure stuff, and a lot of wildlife as well.
Yeah. Because before that, engaging with something like Nat Geo, you would need to pay for a subscription to the website or to get the physical hard copy, or go to film premieres. Like it was as a format and as a genre, it was almost inaccessible.
Particularly in Australia, I think. BBC have a long history of producing, world-class content, and it was, I think, more commonly on free-to-air TV in the UK. Whereas in Australia, you're right. When I was growing up, you would see it on a Sunday night at 7:30 for an hour. That was it. I remember it was after 60 Minutes, and we would watch David Attenborough something or other, but that was the only natural history you could see. But you're right. Yeah, streaming, it's an interesting one.
I'm interested to know kind of the direction that it will go in, because I hear very conflicting things. I hear about, some people saying the budgets are great and I've got tons of work, and then I hear other genres are just dropping off.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely an advocate for the the Australian content quota being applied to streaming as well.
I don't know about that. Can you talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, so for a long time there has been a content quota on Australian television networks to produce. I think it's been 20%.
Okay, so 20% of content has to be produced locally.
Exactly. At some point, our government decided not to apply that to streaming services. At a time, I think, as far as I'm aware, that happened at a time when streaming wasn't dominant. There was still plenty to watch on free-to-air. We all know that's changed now. I never watch free-to-air anymore.
Neither do I.
Very few people do. Very few people even watch television, really. But now that it's all on streaming, it's very clear that content quota would be really useful for an Australian crew and producers. But I think from a cultural perspective as well, it's important for us to have to be watching Australian stories.
I
can't remember why I veered to that particular aspect. What was your question again? It was
just about like expectation and how streaming's changed the work that you do.
And that some people are very busy. So I think you're absolutely right that streaming, they're still obviously spending a lot of money on really fabulous content.
Yeah, some of the drama shows specifically, or
incredible.
Yeah, the budgets on those are higher than features.
Exactly. Yeah. But they're choosing to
almost per episode.
Exactly. Yeah. But they're choosing to put. I think the problem from a cultural and a fairness perspective is they're choosing to put it in. It's a business model, right? But they're choosing a very narrow slice of the type of programs they're making to put all of their money into, and a lot of the other kind of the diversity is suffering. I think diversity of production, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there's in terms of like specifically in the natural history or outdoor kind of genres, I feel like there is a bit of a, it's not as common or appears as regularly in Australian media specifically.
Yeah, and I think even just general documentary as well. There's a lot of kind of high-end true crime, or there'll be one big one every year kind of thing, but there's not a lot of quality documentary that I've seen, particularly from Australian storytellers on any of the streaming platforms. Yeah.
We can circle back to this because you mentioned it earlier. Do you feel that's also because, you said, most outdoor or like natural history has been shot, and the appetite for something new is becoming harder and harder to achieve?
Yeah, I definitely worry about that. And I think going back to the kind of the boom period that I talked about through, 2018 to 2024 probably, the other factor that I didn't mention in that was the kind of the advent of higher end technology. Cameras were now shooting 4K, much higher latitudes. So it was almost like everything needed to be reshot because it was all everything was sub HD quality. So we kind of remade a lot of shows that had been done before in 4K, but now it's all been done again. How do you find new stories?
One of the angles that I really enjoy, there's a cinematographer called Bertie Gregory. I think he's done some work with WildStar as well, done some stuff with Nat Geo. But instead of it just being purely animal behavior and visuals of location and then with a voiceover, instead it's actually showing
behind the scenes
process of how they film these projects. And I find that as another photographer, I find that much more engaging.
Totally, yeah. That's been quite a successful show. I mean, he's got an incredible career. He's actually shooting one of those stories in Australia soon. I can't tell you what it is. But another good friend of mine is working with him on that. Yeah,
that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's a great show. Yeah, people love the behind the scenes.
Yeah,
I think of that kind of, because you see the adventure and the kind of I always aspired to be a wildlife filmmaker, as I said before, because of the adventure. And when you see, what it takes to get the shots they're getting, it's exciting. Right?
I think about it like when Sean's in later, when we do our tech episode, we're talking about, what makes a great image, and we're talking about, photography competitions. But I think, telling the story of how something was captured sometimes adds so much more emotional weight to the actual final product. So, I'm thinking of one of those episodes with Bertie, them being seasick and traveling for 6 days across the Drake Passage or something. That means the payoff, or the emotional payoff they get from capturing that hero image, suddenly that story is more engaging than just the visuals on its own.
Totally. Was that the penguins jumping off the...
this one was
It took some amazing
fin whale gathering. It was like the largest fin whale
I haven't seen that one.
Feeding ever recorded or something. Yeah.
Wow. That reminds me of another, one of my favorite behind the scenes kind of sequences was about a cameraman whose name I forget now, but he was sent to the Himalaya to film the snow leopard.
Oh, wow.
And they waited like 8 weeks,
wow.
in -10, sitting on a little stool, with binoculars, and then eventually captured that amazing shot you've probably seen of the snow leopard, tackling a antelope or something down the cliff face. But the story of waiting 8 weeks to get it. Same deal.
So to finish us up, as someone who's an aspiring DOP or someone who wants to work in natural history, really how do you get your foot in the door?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's important to start shooting. Bertie Gregory actually is a really great example of that. He started, shooting from a very young age, and started trying to track animals. So he learned. It's very important when you shoot natural history to understand the animal behavior as well as how a camera works and how to take a great picture. So
definitely.
For natural history, I think you really have to be out and about doing it. And then, like any part of the industry, volunteer to work or try to get a job as an assistant, basically working with an established DP, so you can get on location and, kind of learn your craft that way, I guess.
Yeah, face-to-face time always always beats the cold email.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Cold emails rarely work, do they?
No.
But just start doing it. I mean, natural history is one of the genres where you actually can just go out on your own and just do it. You can film birds in your backyard. You can film lizard. You can find animals or content or subjects really easily, as opposed to if you aspire to be a drama cinematographer, it's much harder to find people to make a short film with, for example. Whereas in natural history, it's you can definitely start developing the skills on your own easily. There are so many amazing cameras now that are affordable. So it's relatively easy to get your hands on equipment and just get out there and start doing it, really. Yeah.
Sweet. All right, that'll probably wrap us up. So
cool.
All right, that's been another episode of the Full Frame Podcast presented by Sony. Thank you so much for coming in. if people want to see a bit of your work, maybe you just want to mention a couple of the films or projects you've put out recently, and we can drop them in the link in the description.
Yeah, probably the feature doc on the icebergs, the pool, which I think is on Apple TV. Might be on some of the other streamers as well. Might be on Netflix. And a good natural history one would be Kangaroo Valley, which was kind of a kids' film, but it was shot in Australia, so I like advocating for that. It's kind of about dingoes and kangaroos. That's also on Netflix.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Clyde, for having me.
No problem. See you next week.